Okay, so let's start off here by, let me draw your attention first to the standard form of a quadratic equation, which is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And this is going to kind of guide us through some of these questions. So as you can see with the first example that we're about to go over here, the a term is just going to be 1. See how in this quadratic equation right here, we don't see anything in front of the x squared, so we just assume that it's 1. Now our b term is going to be minus 8. So we have to take into consideration the sign in front of it. So see how up here we have bx, and down here instead of a b we have this 8. And like I said, we have to take into consideration the sign, so it becomes minus 8. That's what I mean when I talk about the b term. Okay, and so the c term for this example that we're going to go over here is 16, right? So if we look at the standard form, in place of, we see that there's a c here, and in place of the c in the example, we see our 16. So I just want to start off real basic here, hopefully. Okay, so whenever you see a question like this, x squared minus 8x plus 16, here's a strategy you could use. So basically, you can draw an x like this, and what we want to understand is that up here in our x, we're going to write the result of multiplying a and c. And down here, we're just going to write b. And this is going to make sense in a second. So for this problem, let me do it right here. So I'm going to draw my x out here. Now, let's do a times c. So remember we said that this is just a 1 right here. What is 1 times 16? Well, 1 times 16 is just 16. So I'm going to write a 16 right here. So now I want to fill in the b down here. So what is my b? The b is simply negative 8. So you might be wondering, well, what's going to go right here and here? Okay, well, that's the part that we're getting to here. So the idea is that we need to find two numbers that are going to multiply together to give us 16, but the catch is that they have to add together to give us negative 8. So the approach that I would recommend here is just start off by listing all of the pairs of numbers you can think of that equal 16. So all the pairs that will multiply together to give us 16. So what about 1 and 16? 1 times 16 is going to be just 16. And what about 2 and 8? 2 and 8 will multiply together to give us 16. And what about 4 and 4? Well, 4 and 4 will multiply together to give us 16. So what I've just done here is I've listed out pairs of numbers that will multiply together to give us 16. Now I want to look at each pair, and I want to pick a pair where the numbers will add up to give me negative 8. So let's not worry about the signs yet. All right, let's just add these up. What is 1 plus 16? 17. What is 2 plus 8? 10. What about 4 plus 4? 4 plus 4 is 8. So we know that we're really close here with this pair. So we can really cancel these pairs out, and the reason is because we don't have anything that gives us 8. So 4 and 4 will give us 8, but we don't just want 8. Remember, we want negative 8. So what I'm going to have to think about here is, what if I make these both negative? All right, because why would this make sense? Well, negative 4 times negative 4, negative 4 and negative 4 are going to multiply together to give me positive 16. Now, if I add up negative 4 and negative 4, if I add them together, I get negative 8. So this pair gives us exactly what we need. All right, it multiplies together to give us positive 16 and adds together to give us negative 8. All right, so now I can kind of fill in here a negative 4 and a negative 4. Okay, so we're almost done, but we're not quite done yet. So now what I need to do is I'm going to go back and I'm going to, so basically what I figured out here is that I can rewrite this x squared minus 8x plus 16 as x minus 4 times x minus 4. And if you wanted to check this, which I'm not going to do for the sake of time, if you've studied the FOIL method before, or you know about the FOIL method, you could actually use the FOIL method, and you could take this x minus 4 and x minus 4. You could use the FOIL method, and you would turn this back into x squared minus 8x plus 16. We're not going to do that here for the sake of time, but what I want to do is I want to take x minus 4, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. And I want to solve this for x. So x minus 4 equals 0. I want to figure out what x equals. Since it's x minus 4, I'm going to do the opposite of subtraction, which is addition. So I add 4 to both sides. I would figure out that x equals positive 4. Okay, so I did x minus 4 equals 0. I found that x equals 4. Then I would do the same thing with this over here, x minus 4. I would set this one equal to 0, solve it for x, and I would figure out that the solutions are x equals 4 and x equals 4. All right, let's look at another example. Okay, here's another example, and if you'd like to, you can pause the video and try this on your own first, and then we'll go over it. So hopefully you had a chance to try this if you wanted to. And basically, the first step is going to be just like we did in the last example. So we're going to first start by multiplying A and C together. So what's my A going to be? My A is just 1, right? Because x squared, we don't write the 1 in front of it usually, right? But we just know it's 1. And we know that the C is 16. So 1 times 16 is positive 16. Now let's write our b in here. So what is our b? Our b is minus 10. Okay. So the first step, again, is just multiply a and c together and just list out what b is. Now, what we have to do, again, is we have to find two pairs of numbers. We have to find two numbers that will multiply together to give us 16, but the catch is that they have to add together to give us negative 10. So let's again think about what numbers will multiply together to give us 16. So let me draw a line here to kind of help you follow this a little bit better. Numbers that will multiply together to give us 16. Well, what about 2 and 8? And note here that I'm not worrying so much about the sign yet, because I know that negative 2 and negative 8, like we could do, those would also give me 16, but I'm not going to worry so much about the sign yet. I just want to list out the pairs of numbers here that will give me 16. And we have 16 and 1. So we've got 2 and 8, 4 and 4, 16 and 1. So again, all I'm doing here is I figured out that if I multiply 1 and 16, I get 16. So I need to find, my next step then would be to find two numbers that will multiply together to give me 16. And then I'm going to add them up, and I'm going to see if it's going to give me negative 10, or 10 at least. So if I just add up 2 and 8, and again, I'm not worried about the signs yet. We obviously have a problem here because we don't want positive 10, we do need negative 10. All right, but we see that the first pair gets us really close if we add them up. So I'm just adding these up. What is 2 plus 8 is 10. And I like to show an arrow here instead of an equal sign. What is 4 and 4? 4 plus 4 is 8. Now 16 and 1 is 17. So we need negative 10 here. 2 and 8 gives us positive 10, so that's close. This won't work and this won't work. So now the only problem here is that 2 and 8 are giving us positive 10. So how can I make a change here? Well, if instead of using 2 and 8, I use negative 2 and negative 8, understand here that negative 2 and negative 8 are going to multiply together to give me positive 16, which is what I need. Now, if you add negative 2 to negative 8, it'll give you negative 10. And if you're having trouble with understanding how negative 2 minus 8 or negative 2 plus negative 8, however you want to think about it, if you're having trouble understanding how that gives you negative 10, by all means, use a calculator or your phone calculator if that's what you have. You know, whatever. I don't care if you use calculators for this video. I just want you to get the basics. So this is the pair, this is our golden ticket right here, this -2 and -8. So I'm just going to list -2 here, and I'm going to list -8 right here. Okay, so now the thing that I think is tricky to understand for some people is that this x squared minus 10x plus 16, I can now rewrite this as x minus 2 and x minus 8. And again, like I just was saying, there's a technique called the FOIL method where you have to know that for the GED test. I don't want to just overload you and go over that in this video here too, but you could, if you don't believe me that x minus 2 times x minus 8 is the same thing as x squared minus 10x plus 16, you could just simply use the FOIL method, right? You would do x times x, you would do x times -8x, etc., etc. I'm not going to teach that right now because I don't want to overload you, but I'm just take my word for it that x squared minus 10x plus 16 is the same thing as x minus 2 times x minus 8. It's just written differently, okay? So to find the solutions now, I'm going to first take x minus 2 and set that equal to 0. So x minus 2, if I set that equal to 0, and I solve it for x, what do I get? So x minus 2, to get x by itself on the left-hand side of the equation, I have to do the opposite operation of subtraction, which is addition. And whatever I do to one side, I always have to do it to the other. X minus 2, if I add 2, the 2 is going to cancel out here, because minus 2 plus 2 cancels out, and I have 0 over here on the right-hand side, so if I add 2, I am just going to be left with x equals 2. So one solution of the quadratic equation is x equals 2. Now there's a second solution too, and I have to look at this x minus 8 and set that equal to 0. I'm going to run out of room to really draw this out here, but basically what I have to do is I have to add 8 to both sides of the equation here. And once I do that and I rewrite, I'll see that x equals 8. So the two solutions to the quadratic equation here are x equals 2 and x equals 8. Okay, so the next example is x squared minus 9x plus 18. And if you can work through the whole question, then that's fantastic. If you're not quite there yet, then don't worry about it. Just try to get the first step. And if you've got that, try to get the second step. With each question you do here, just try to do a little bit more on your own until you get it. I just want to keep working with you here until the light bulb goes off and you eventually get it. So you can pause the video here, try this one out, and if you get stuck, don't worry about it. We're just going to figure it out together. Okay. So basically, the first step here, hopefully you had a chance to try this if you want to. The first step, again, is to take A and C and multiply them together. So what's my A? My A is just 1 again. What's my C? Well, this time my C is going to be 18. So 1 times 18 is just simply 18. Okay, now I'm just going to write my B down here. So I just simply look at this. It's -9, and I just simply write -9 here. And this is more, I just put the B here just more so than anything else to help me keep track of it. Okay, so if you got this so far, then that's fantastic. Now, what's the next step after this? Well, the next step is to list out pairs of numbers that will multiply together to give me 18. And we're not going to worry too much about the signs yet. We see that it's a -9 here, so we have to take that into consideration. But, you know, I would just start by just listing out things that will multiply together to give us 18. So let me just give us some room to work here. So obviously, the first thing that I can think of is 18 and 1. Now, also, what about 2 and 9? And then I also have 6 and 3. And like I've been saying, I said earlier in the video, feel free to use your calculator as much as you want, even if it's just a phone calculator, which I use all the time when I teach. Or you can just go onto Google and type in calculator and pick one up that way. But I just want you to get the process right here. I don't want you to worry about having to do too much math in your head right now. So the next step, so we've listed out a bunch of pairs, or all the pairs we can think of, that multiply together to give me 18. So let me add them all up and see if I can see what that gets us here. So 18 and 1 is 19. And remember, we need two numbers that will add up to be -9 here, all right? So this is not going to help us. Now, what about 2 and 9? Well, 2 and 9 is 11. Not going to help us. Now, what about 6 and 3? Well, 6 and 3 give us 9, so that's going to help us. We're not quite there yet because we don't just want 9, we want -9, right? So instead of 6 plus 3, what I really want to do is change the signs here. So I'll make it -6 and -3. And why do I want to make them both negative? Well, a negative number times another negative number is always going to give me a positive number. And since I want two numbers that I'll multiply together to give me positive 18, I need to make it -6 and -3 to get my positive 18. But also, note here that when I add them up, -6 and -3, I add them up, it gives me -9, which is exactly what I wanted to get. So I'm just going to kind of write them here to keep track of them. I've got -6 and -3. Okay, so now my next step, I want to take this x squared minus 9x plus 18, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to write x minus 6 and set that equal to 0 here. I don't really even need the parentheses here, but I want to solve this, so just kind of ignore these parentheses. I want to find what x is equal to here. So when I say solve for x, I just mean we want to get the x alone on the left-hand side of the equation. So when I say left-hand side of the equation, here's my equal sign. So everything over here on the right, I'll call that the right-hand side. Everything over here on the left, I'll call that the left-hand side. And I want to get x by itself on the left-hand side. I don't have x by itself. I have x minus 6. So the opposite of subtraction is addition. So if I add 6 to this side, the 6's will cancel out. But in math, whatever I do to one side, I also have to do to the other. So I also have to do 0 plus 6 over here. So one solution to the quadratic equation will be x equals 6. So now I have to deal with it. So I've dealt with the -6. Now I have to deal with the -3. So here's one solution. Let me box this up here. So next, what I need to do is I need to do x minus 3 and set that equal to 0. And so what I would do is I would, again, add 3 to both sides. And I'm doing that, I went off the screen a little bit, but I'm doing that to cancel these 3's out and give me x by itself. But whatever I do to one side, I always have to do it to the other. So I have to add 3 to this side as well. So the other solution is going to be x equals positive 3. So the next example is x squared plus 8x plus 15. And I know it's really tedious and boring to work on these questions, and I know it's hard to focus and keep your attention during the whole example here, but I really think this is going to pay off for you, especially if you're struggling. So really great job sticking with it so far, and I want to let you pause the video. I'll give you a chance to try this, and if you get stuck on the first or second step, don't worry about it. Just try each video or each example. Just try to learn a little bit more. Just try to follow a little bit more each time, and eventually the light bulb will go off and you'll get it. So let's have you try it. Okay, so what we want to do here is start off just like we always would, right? What is A times C? In this case, I've got 1 times 15, so I'm just going to put 15 up here. So that's the first step. Multiply A and C together. Now the next step, I want to identify what B is, and I'm just going to write it right here. So in this case, it's just positive 8, or you can just write 8. You don't need to put the plus sign here. So just 8. Okay, so hopefully you're with me so far. Because now the next step, what is the next step? The next step is to multiply. I want to find pairs of numbers that will multiply together to give me 15. So let me list them out. So the obvious one to always start off with is the number here times 1. So what about 15 and 1? Now another pair would be 5 and 3. Okay, great. So let's add these up now. 15 and 1 gets me 16. So that's not going to help us out here. 5 and 3 is 8. So what do you know? So I can put 5 here, and I can put 3 here. And this is actually almost easier since we don't have to work with any negative signs here. So just to confirm and just kind of rehash what I just did here, First, we did A times C. We found out that that was 15. Then we just listed 8 down here just to kind of keep track of it. Then we listed pairs of numbers that multiplied together to give us 16 until we found a pair that added together to give me 8. And then I just listed them here. I listed 5 here and 3 here just to kind of keep track of them. So we're not quite done yet. Now, what I need to do is I'm going to write x plus 5 and set that equal to 0. And it's x plus 5 because this 5 is positive. Remember in the last examples we had to do x minus for each one. Now we've got positive here, right? And I'm also going to do that with x plus 3. So I take the 5 and the 3, and I'm going to write x plus 5 equals 0 and x plus 3 equals 0. And so all I have to do is subtract 5 from both sides here. And in this case, this would be x equals negative 5. Because if I do 0 minus 5, it's negative 5. Now for here, I've got x plus 3. That's going to give me x equals negative 3. So the two solutions here are x equals negative 5 and x equals negative 3. Okay, here's another example. X squared plus 10x plus 16. So I'll let you pause the video and try this out. And then as always, we're going to go over it. Okay, so what's the first step here? Well, technically the first step is to draw a big X like this, but the real first step is we're going to do 1 times 16. We're going to do, in other words, A times C. So 1 times 16 is just 16. And I'm just going to write it here, more to help me keep track of it than anything else. Now, the next step is to just look at B, and I'm going to see that my B is just positive 10. So that is easy enough. So I just write that here. Okay, so hopefully you're with me so far. Hopefully this makes sense. Now the next step is to find sets of numbers that multiply together to give me 16. But I need something that's going to add together to give me 10. So what I would do next is just start off by listing pairs that will multiply together to give me 16. 16 and 1 is an obvious one. What about 8 and 2? And we also have 4 and 4. So I listed everything I could think of that will multiply together to give me 16. So the next step, I want to add these up. And I also am aware here that you could also write out, you could also list negative 8 and negative 2, negative 4, negative 16, negative 1. Those all are going to give me 16. But, you know, before we even mess around with the signs, I think it's sometimes helpful to just list out the pairs and just deal with adding them up with positive numbers. Just see how far that gets you. So 8 and 2, if I add those up, I get 10. 4 and 4 gives me 8. Now, what did I need? Remember, we needed to get this 10. And the pair 8 and 2 are going to give me that 10. So this is what I want to roll with here. So I'm going to put an 8 right here and a 2 here. And this is just more so, this is just kind of a way to organize all of this, right? You know, if you can do this all in your head without having to write it out like this, then that's great. But, you know, I would recommend most people either write it out like this or just, you know, find another way to write it out that makes sense to you. I always recommend to write everything out on your test whenever you can. Try not to keep things in your head. A lot of people like to try to do things in their head, and that's up to you to decide. But that's what I would recommend, just to help you keep track of things. And basically now, what I'm going to do, the next step, I'm going to do x plus 8. And I don't even need really to write these parentheses. I keep doing it, and I'm going to set that equal to 0. And then what I'm going to do is x plus 2 and set that equal to 0 as well. So I need to solve both of these for x. So x plus 8 equals 0. I need to get the x by itself, so I just subtract 8 from one side. The 8s will cancel out. Whatever you do to one side, you always have to do it to the other. So this is going to leave me with x equals negative 8. So that is one solution. So the other solution is going to come from x plus 2 equals 0. If I solve it for x, I would subtract the 2 from both sides, and that's going to tell me that x equals negative 2. So the solutions here are going to be x equals negative 8 and x equals negative 2. Okay, so here's another example, and there's a slight little curveball here. x squared plus 8x equals 20. So let's have you solve this and let's see if you can figure this out. And if you get stumped, don't worry about it because as always, we're just going to go over it. Okay, so basically here, if you ever see a question like this on the GED, all you have to do is make sure that everything is set equal to 0. So right now this is set equal to 20, which is not what we want. So we're going to subtract 20 from both sides of the question. And really, before we even begin, I just want to rewrite this whole thing as x squared plus 8x minus 20 equals 0. And you don't really need to write this equals 0, but hopefully you see the point. So hopefully to get this one right, if you were able to work this question the whole way through on your own, you had to see that you needed to first subtract 20. So that it would look like this, x squared plus 8x minus 20. And if you didn't know to do that, don't worry about it. I just want you to know for your test that this is one extra step that you'll have to do, because you might see a question that's set up like this on your test. Okay, so now to work our way through the question, we're going to use the same process as always. So we have x squared, which is, the a is going to be 1, times our c, which is minus 20. So minus 20 is going to go up top here. So a times c gives us minus 20. Now our b is just 8. So I'm going to just put an 8 down here. And now we're going to want to think of things that are going to multiply together to give us minus 20. All right, and so since we have minus 20 up here, we are going to want to look at pairs that are going to include a negative number this time. So basically, what multiplies together to give me negative 20? So an obvious one would be negative 1 and 20. You could also flip this around and you could say 1 and negative 20. All right, but if we add these up, it's not going to give us 8, right? Minus 1 plus 20 is going to give me 19. Okay, and then this, if I add these up, this is going to give me negative 19. So neither of these are going to help us here. So what else is going to multiply together to give me 20? Well, what about 10? Or I'm sorry, to give us negative 20. 10 and negative 2 is an option here. And if we add this up, if we do 10 minus 2, that gives me 8. So we now have our pair isolated here. We have 10 and negative 2. So just to help us keep track, I'm going to put a 10 here. And I'm going to put a minus 2 here. So now we can set up our, we can get ready to bring it in for a landing here. We can set up our x plus 10 equals 0. And hopefully you remember by now that we would solve this by subtracting 10 from both sides. I'm kind of flying through this just because we've gone over this several times. And if you're having trouble with this, don't worry. I'm just moving a little faster for the sake of time with this. So one solution would be x equals negative 10. And now we've got x minus 2 equals 0. And if you solve this out, you'll see that x equals positive 2. So our two solutions are x equals negative 10 and x equals 2. So I know I flew through this one a little bit faster, but the main things I wanted you to see are, number one, know that if you have an x squared plus 8x equals 20 type of scenario, to bring this, whatever this number happens to be, bring it over to the left-hand side of the equation first. And I also just wanted you to see if you've got a negative number up here, you're going to have to consider the negative sign a little bit more carefully when you find the numbers that are going to multiply together to give you this up here. And if you've had trouble with this, I would encourage you to watch this example again, or really take your time with this video. There's no rush here. Now we're going to move on to a little bit trickier examples. So all the examples we've looked at so far had a 1 as the A term. Now we're going to start looking at the questions that don't have a 1, that have something other than 1. So a lot of people struggle more with these questions, and we're going to break it down here. It's not that much harder than what we were just doing. There's really only an extra step or two to these. So we're going to start off the same exact way. So first of all, actually, let me turn it over to you. Let me have you pause the video. Just try your best to figure this one out. Just see how far you can get with this. And, as always, don't worry, we'll go over it. So let's have you do that now. Okay, so the way you do this is you really do most of the question the same way as the other examples. We're going to start by taking our A and our C and multiplying them. The only difference is that here we have a 2 instead of a 1. So what is 2 times 7? That's 14. So I'm going to put that on the top of my x here. And also kind of, you could think of this like a diamond. I don't know, I'll just call it an x for the sake of this video. But I've got my a times c, and let me look here at my b term now. My b term is a 9, so I'm just going to put that down here. Really just, if nothing else, just to keep track of it. So now, the same exact process is what we're going to follow here. So let's start by thinking of things that will multiply together to give me 14. What about 1 and 14? What about 7 and 2? So here are the two pairs of numbers that will give me 14. And again, you could also do, if you wanted to, you could do -1 and -14. You could write those out as well. You could write out -7 and -2, but I think it's it's a little bit more, adds more confusion to the situation sometimes to add the signs in at this point. So that's why I'm not showing them in this step here. So how about now what we'll do is we'll add, what is 1 and 14? That's 15. And remember, we're trying to get a pair that's going to multiply together to give me 14, but add up to give me 9. So this is not going to work. What about 7 and 2? Well, 7 and 2 is going to give me 9. So this is the golden ticket right here. It's my 7 and 2. So I'm just going to put 7 here and 2 here just to keep track of all of this. So we're in a really good place with this problem right now. So basically, we've done the same process as always, but there's one little twist here. So let me show you the twist. And I don't really know how else to explain this other than to just tell you this is something that you're going to have to just kind of remember. But basically, I'm going to start by doing the exact same step we did in all the other questions. So I'll start with my 7. So I'll write x plus 7. Simple enough, right? But here's the trick now. I have to look at the number that's in my a, and it's a 2. So what I'm going to do, instead of just writing 7, I'm going to do 7 over 2. So that's just one of those things you're going to have to, I would say, just kind of memorize. Now, it's a little bit complicated to explain why you'd have to divide by 2, so just trust me on this. This is just one of those things, so get this much of your x or your diamond done. And remember that if it's a problem that has something that's not a 1 as your a term, like a 2 or 3, whatever it happens to be, you would write over here x plus 7 or whatever it happens to be in your problem. But then you're going to take that number and you're going to divide it by a. Okay. And now we're going to really do the same process here as we've always done. We want to get x by itself because this is really equal to 0 here. And so what I would do, since it's x plus 7 over 2, I want to subtract 7 over 2 to cancel these out. And whatever I do to one side, I always have to do it to the other side. So 0 minus 7 over 2 is just minus 7 over 2, or negative 7 over 2. So one solution here is x equals negative 7 divided by 2. So that's one solution here. So now let me find the other solution. So I have to look at this too. So I'm going to set it up just like always. I'm going to do x plus 2. I don't know why I keep putting these parentheses here. I'll just stick with that. I don't know why I'm doing that. X plus 2 equals 0. And now, again, since the number in our a, right, in the a term, is not a 1, I'm going to have to take that number 2 and divide it by my a term, which happens to be 2. So fortunately here, 2 divided by 2 is just 1. So I can really just simplify this and draw an arrow here to show what I'm doing as x plus 1 equals 0. So x plus 1 equals 0. If I solve it for x, I'm going to get x equals negative 1. So the other solution is x equals negative 1. So if you didn't get that, don't worry, we're going to go over another example right now. Okay, so here's another example. Let's have you pause the video, try this out, and then as always, we will go over it. Okay, so basically in this case, let's start off the exact same way as always. So I'm going to draw my little x diamond thing here, and let's do 4 times negative 6, which gives me negative 24. So my A times C is negative 24. Now the next step, as always, let's look at the B, and my B is simply 5, so I'm just going to put 5 down here. And so now the next step here is to list out numbers that multiply together to give us negative 24. Now, there's one little difference here that we haven't seen, at least I can't remember seeing this yet in this video. Since we have a negative number here, we're going to have to, when we list out pairs that multiply together to be 24, we're going to have to include negatives in there. So what I mean is, think of numbers that multiply together to give you 24. What about 1 and 24? Well, in this case, we can't just list 1 and 24 because 1 and 24 are just going to give us 24. Since it's negative 24, we are going to actually have to include a negative sign here. So negative 1 and negative 24, or negative 1 and positive 24, and 1 and negative 24. All right, so we will actually have to include the negative signs, include one negative sign whenever you have a negative number up here. Okay. Now, what else multiplies together to be 24? Well, what about 3 and 8? And since it's negative 24, we need to, there's two different options here. We have 3 and negative 8, and negative 3 and 8. So right off the bat here, what I can see is that negative 3 plus 8 is going to give me positive 5. So right off the bat, I can tell that minus 3 and positive 8, these are going to be our winners here. So I'm going to put minus 3 right here, and I'm just going to write 8 here. Okay, so now we get to the part that's a little bit different, but hopefully not too tricky for you. So I want to, since it's negative 3 here, I'm just going to start by writing x minus 3 equals 0. However, since we don't have a 1 as our a, we have a 4 as our a, I need to divide this 3 by 4. And you can just leave it right here just as a fraction. You don't have to turn this into a decimal. You don't have to mess with it. You can just write x minus 3 over 4. Now, as always, I want to get x by itself. So if I add 3 over 4, these are going to cancel out. And whatever I do to one side, I have to also do it to the other side as well. So one of my answers here is going to be x equals 3 over 4. Now, the next step is I have to do the same thing with my 8, only this is going to be a little bit easier. So let me write x plus 8 and set that equal to 0. But you have to remember to take this 4. Since we have a non-1 in front of our x squared, I have to make sure that I divide that by 4. Again, this is just a step. I just recommend just try to remember this because it's a little bit complicated if I try to explain exactly why you have to do this step. But this is just one thing I'd recommend you just try to remember, that whatever number is your a, you're going to divide here. All right, and I can actually do a simplification here because 8 divided by 4 is 2. So really, I can rewrite this as x plus 2 equals 0. And if I solve this for 2, if I subtract 2 on both sides, I'll see that the other solution is x equals negative 2. So my two solutions here, I have x equals 3 over 4 and x equals negative 2. Okay, here's another example for you. 4x squared plus 5x minus 9. So I'll let you try this. I know these are a little bit trickier than the kind at the beginning, but hopefully you're starting to get this now. And if not, don't worry about it. Here's a new example for you to try. Just try your best, see how far you can take it. If you get it right, great. If not, it's all about the process here. So I just want you to focus on the learning without the pressure to get these right now. So I'll turn it over to you and I'll let you try. Okay, so as always, what we want to do to start off is we're going to take the first number or we're going to take our a and multiply it by our c. So we're going to do 4 times negative 9, and that's negative 36. And if you need your calculator to help you, don't worry about it. I still sometimes draw a blank when it comes to times tables, as many people do, so don't worry about it. That's what it's there for. And so basically, now let's identify what our b is. Our b is simply positive 5. It's always a good idea to make sure it's not a negative or anything like that, but it's just 5. So the strategy now, as always, and I'll say it once, I'll keep saying it to hopefully have it sink in for you here one of these times, is that we want to find two numbers that'll multiply together to give us negative 36, but we want them to add up together to give us 5. So a good way to do this is just think of things that multiply together to give us negative 36. So in this case, we've got 6 and negative 6. All right. And we do have to kind of keep track of our negative signs here because it is negative 36. Let's see, what else is there? What about 4 and negative 9? 4 and negative 9. And also I could also do negative 4 and 9. So if I do 4 minus 9, or in other words, so if I try to do 4 plus negative 9, that's the same as just doing 4 minus 9. That would give me negative 5, which is not exactly what we want, but it's getting us in the ball game. We're in the ballpark. So the home run is going to come from doing negative 4 and 9, right? So if we do negative 4 plus 9, it's really the same as doing 9 minus 4, however you want to think about it. We get 5, which is what we want. So we're good now. We found our pair. Life is going to be good here because I'm just going to write negative 4 here and 9 here to just keep track of what we're doing. And now comes the interesting part of the problem, right? So what I want to do here is let's start off with our 4 here, right? So we do x minus 4 equals 0. So this is how we set it up. Now remember, because we have something that's not a 1, we have a 4 here as our a. What we have to do is you're going to have to remember to divide this by 4. And if we do that, we have 4 divided by 4 is just 1. So really this is the same as, I can simplify this as x minus 1 equals 0. Now if I add a 1 to both sides, I'll find that one solution here is x equals positive 1. All right, which is exactly what I want. Now, the next step is to do that same thing with the 9. So we have x, and this time it's x plus 9. And what I'm going to have to do is I have to look at that 4 here, and I'm going to have to divide by 4 here, all right, equals 0. So really, since it's x plus 9 over 4, the solution to this is going to be x equals negative 9 over 4. So those are the two solutions here to this example. Okay, great job making it this far into the video. Here's another example. 2x squared plus 11x plus 5. Okay, so I'll let you pause the video, try this one out, and then we'll go over it. So let me make my x here first. And as always, let's start with a times c. So a is 2, c is 5. I multiply them together and I get 10. So now let me just take stock of what b is. B is positive 11, so let me put that down here. So our number up top here is a positive number, which makes it, I think, a little bit easier. So let's list numbers that we can that are going to multiply together to give us 10. So what about 5 and 2? And since this is a positive number, I don't usually bother with negative signs at this step. Maybe if this was a negative number, you could write it in, like you could write negative, I guess you could list negative 5 and negative 2 if you wanted to, if that helps you, but I usually don't do that at this step. You probably noticed that by now at this point in the video, but basically then we've also got 10 and 1. And if you want to, if it helps, you can write negative 10 and negative 1, because negative 10 and negative 1 will, or no, wait a second. Yeah, negative 10 and negative 1 are going to be positive 10. Okay, so if I add these up, this is going to give me positive 7, won't help. This is going to give me negative 7, won't help. This is going to give me 10 plus 1 is going to give me positive 11, which helps. Actually, that helps us a lot because that's what we needed. This will give me negative 11, which isn't what we want. All right, so I'm going to write my 10 here and my 1 here just to remember it. So now I'm going to do x plus 10 equals 0. And I'm going to solve for x, but there's one more step I need to do. Since this is not a 1, I have to take this number and divide it by 2. So remember to do that step. And 10 divided by 2 is 5. So I can really rewrite this as x plus 5 equals 0. Since 10 divided by 2 is 5. Now, to solve this for x, I just subtract 5 from both sides. If I subtract 5 from both sides, I'll see that x equals negative 5. So that's one part of the solution here. Now I need to go find the other solution, and I've got this 1 to work with. So basically, I'm going to write x plus 1 equals 0. But there's one important thing I need to do. I need to take this 2, and I'm going to do 1 divided by 2. So I have x plus 1 over 2 equals 0. If I subtract 1 over 2 from both sides, I'll get x equals negative 1 over 2. And that is my second solution.